this presentation. And if it is a useful resource, we will post it on the website. We will also be taking most of the discussion here and trying to put it into a FAQ document that probably will be more useful. So we'll see. I think we'll plan on trying to post this if it's useful. So the purpose of today's call is to just give some technical information and answer any questions you have around the requests for information. So we're going to start with a very brief call. Again, it's going to be very informal, so feel free to either raise your hand or come off mic and you can interrupt at any point. We are going to have some solid Q&A sections at the end, and we are going to break it down by entity type. In an email I had, and sorry, you may have received this twice, once from me and one from Christina. We're going to go, I think, wholesalers, PBMs, insurers, and then manufacturers. We think that the most questions are probably going to come from the manufacturers, so we put them at the end. So sorry for making folks wait. And again, we'll start with this very brief presentation, but then generally it's just meant to be a Q&A session where we can answer any questions that you guys have. So Sydney, we'll just go through the slides if you're okay with that. So next slide. So just for our presentation portion on the front end, we're just going to give a quick overview of the request for information. Then we're going to talk about the forms that we've released. And then we're going to do a quick walkthrough of the forms. So Krishna from our team is going to kind of show you what the forms look like. During that session, I would say feel free to ask in real time as Krishna is kind of scrolling through the forms. And then finally, at the end, we'll just take any kind of questions that you have and then stakeholder input. Again, we are going to try to take any comments and questions that come in and put them into a Q&A document that we'll make available as well. Next slide. So just at a high level, we have a request for information process, and we commonly refer folks to the regulation 1401-0404B to just answer any questions you may have. So as you go through this process, I would just start by reading those regulations. It's pretty straightforward. So the folks that can submit as part of this request for information process are going to be manufacturers, health insurance carriers, pharmacy benefit managers, and wholesalers. So this RFI process is specific to those entities. We do have kind of our other public comment processes for folks that don't fit into those categories that folks are always welcome to use as well. And as you go through the list, you'll see it's a pretty extensive list of the data that we're asking for. A lot of them are statutorily mandated data elements, and then also the data elements that the board has added through the regulations. And then also there's the opportunity for you to provide any supplemental documentation. So I guess I probably should have started with this. At a very high level, the purpose of the request for information is for the stakeholders to provide information that they would like the board to consider to give a full picture of if a drug may be causing affordability challenges. So the drugs that are under cost review, this is everyone's opportunity to provide supplemental information to kind of help the board understand, the different costs associated with the drugs, as well as the clinical benefits and things like that. As we've talked about in a number of circumstances, well, a number of times in our meetings, the board has based a lot of their work on something called the All-Payer Claims Database, which is a database of Medicare, Medicaid, and then a subset of commercial payers. But there's a lot of gaps and challenges and limitations to that data that the board fully acknowledges. And this RFI process is a chance to get the other information before them so they can kind of think about that and incorporate it into all of their kind of considerations as they do the cost review process. So that's at a very high level what the purpose of this process is. The last thing I'll say is just on how do we respond to the request for information. So you can submit data. We allow for mail, so you can send hard copies of documents. I think we listed out a few different ways that you can do that, or through secure file transfer. I think we'll talk about this a little bit later, but we have a secure file transfer platform that we use that we are happy for folks to use as part of that process. I know some folks probably have their own secure file transfer protocols that they are using, and I think we are generally kind of agnostic on what that process is. So to facilitate the actual transfer of data, we just request that you reach out to us at the RFI email, which is rfi.pdab@maryland.gov. And then we'll work kind of through the technical details, because I think folks will probably submit data in different ways, and we want to be, receptive and open to that. But at a very high level, we have a secure transfer file transfer protocol. So you would just reach out to us through the RFI email, and then we would coordinate with you to send over the link for the secure file transfer. So that's kind of a high-level overview of the RFI itself. Next slide. So one of the things that we did was we created data submission forms that generally align with the regulations. So there's a couple things to note on this. So one, it's a completely optional form. We meant for this to be a resource for the folks on the line. If you just have a blank slate and you're looking for something to use, this form is meant to be kind of a template and a tool that you can use. It is based on kind of a number of different forms that have been used in other contexts, so like other transparency programs and things like that. So we've looked at like a number of different example templates that folks have used, and then kind of use those to develop our form. And they generally align kind of one for one with the data elements that are in the RFI regulations, right? So basically, it just like provides the space for you to be responsive to each of the data elements within the RFI regulations. It also allows for supplemental information. So at the very end, I think we also just have this bucket of saying, if there's anything you want the board to consider, like here's the place to include it. And I would encourage heavy and strong use of that. So if you feel like the board is not asking for the right information, or you think it's really important that they see this other piece of information, please feel free to liberally share additional supplemental information and documentation as well. Going back to the part about it being an optional form, I think we want to be extremely flexible and supportive of whatever formats that you are already using, right? So we developed this template as a resource, but I think we're taking it in any format that's most convenient for the folks that are submitting these data. I think Krishna will talk about this shortly, but we also ask for data at certain levels. If you don't, so an example would be like the NDC level versus the drug level. If you don't capture that data in a meaningful way in your databases or whatever you're using to create these, to answer the request for information, we would take it at whatever your current level is. We would just ask you to kind of clarify that for us and basically make sure it's clear that on what you're sending. But again, we're like, if you have ready-made exports that kind of address these, I think we're generally very flexible. And I think another characteristic of this first round of the RFI is, it's going to be a learning process for all of us. So I think we are at the point where we want it to be as easy and convenient as possible for the folks that are submitting. And then, we're going to kind of learn from this process and see, what the results provide. So we do want to be as flexible as possible there. Next slide. So with that, we're going to go through each of the forms, and I think we want to allow for open Q&A through these forms. So again, feel free to ask any questions here. I guess one other quick caveat is this is meant to be a resource. We're kind of answering overall questions that anyone may have. If you feel like your question is not answered or you don't want to ask it in this forum, we're always available. So just reach out to us through the RFI email, and we are going to kind of have a living document of Q&As that will hopefully answer questions that we seem to be common. So with that, feel free to jump in whenever you want to. I guess there is kind of a hand raising feature if you want to use that. But otherwise, I would say feel free to jump in at any point when you have specific questions on any of the forms. So with that, Krishna, are you okay going through the wholesaler form? Oh, one thing I should have noted, everything that's available on the website is in PDF form. And that is just to kind of maintain the integrity of the documents. For anyone that is submitting the data, we have Word versions or Excel versions. You just need to notify us and we will send those over to you. And anyone that received a direct request from us should have had access to at least the Word version, and then Excel versions are available upon request. So with that, I'll turn it over to Krishna to kind of quickly walk us through the form.
So I'll give a quick rundown here of the RFI form for the wholesalers. So what we're going to see between the RFI request forms for the wholesalers, the PBMs, insurers, and manufacturers is that there's a fair amount of overlap. So these first few sections are going to be real similar for each one. So the first section of the RFI is just a background. It's talking about where we get our authority for the RFI request. The next section is going to go into the instructions for completion. So what we're requesting here is several data points, and we'll get into those. For each data point, the PDAB would preferably want to get information at the level of the NDC 11s or National Drug Codes 11 digits. However, based on however submitters are keep and maintain their information, we also accept submissions at the aggregate level for the drug. And so anyone, and that's perfectly fine, and anyone who's doing that, we just request that they check the box here for submission of aggregate information only. Now, in this form, eventually we'll see that we have tables that can be populated. However, this isn't the only way, as Dr. York had mentioned, for completing this. To complete these data requests, we can utilize the tables that we provide in the appendices of the RFI forms. Submitters can also request supplemental Excel files that we can send over. If the submitters or respondents want to, they can type their data directly into each applicable section of this form, or they can just provide documentation in any form that they deem as suitable. So, as Dr. York had mentioned, if there are any questions regarding the data submission request form, we just ask that you reach out to the RFI at pdab.maryland.gov. So now we can move into the next section, part 1. So part 1, this is really the only part of these forms that we request that everyone fill out. And this is going to be the contact information. So it's just going to provide a point of contact for the wholesaler, the name of the wholesaler, along with the rest of the contact information. Moving down to the next table, we'll just request general information on drugs. And that's going to include the non-proprietary drug name, the brand name of the drug, and any applicable 11-digit national drug codes. So we'll kind of wrap up our part 1 for the contact and drug information. Next, we can move into the data dictionary. What we're going to see here is we're going to see all the requested data points that we're asking for, along with their regulatory citation. So we can see what all of these are here, and then we kind of coded each of these data points into certain sections. So here we have really 2 main sections: number of units sold and sales to purchasers for the wholesaler request. So scrolling down into part 2, we'll see here first, part 2 is going to be basically the first part of information that we're requesting for the wholesalers, and that's going to be units sold. So all we're asking for here is the number of units sold in Maryland for the most recent fiscal tax year. And we just want to report it for each NDC 11 or at the aggregate level. So that's all we're asking for units sold. And we can scroll down to sales to purchasers. We have 2 data elements we're asking for here: prices charged to Maryland purchasers, or the total amount of price concessions or discounts provided by the wholesaler to any purchasers in the state. So parts 2 and 3 here outlining the data elements that we're requesting from the wholesalers. And what we request is, however submitters are providing this information, that they include basically a methodology or a narrative outlining the methodology they use to produce these numbers and any caveats that should be considered when analyzing the data. And also, we realize here we have a number of data elements that we are requesting that don't have a specified time year. So for those, we just ask that submitters provide it for the most recent calendar or fiscal tax year. And whichever one is chosen, whichever one's easiest to provide, we just ask that you note the time frame that occurs in. The last section that we have here is just submission of additional documentation. So if, like Dr. York had said, if there's anything that you believe we didn't ask for and should be considered by the board, we just ask that you submit it as supplemental documentation. Then we can scroll down into the appendices. So here in the appendices, we have the tables that we provided for respondents to fill out. So right here, we can see just all you need to fill out is NDC 11. And if you're submitting an aggregate level, which is ask for the non-proprietary drug name, along with a requested data point here. If you're a submitter and you plan on using our tables in the appendices, we just ask that if you're doing this at the NDC level, just please right click on the Word document, insert a row below, and continue doing that for all the NDC 11s that you would populate here. And if we scroll down into the next page, we'll see Appendix B, which is our table for sales to purchasers. So essentially, all the RFIs are going to follow this format where we have explanations of each section of data that we're asking for. And then at the end, we'll have the appendices that include the tables that can be populated. However, once again, you don't have to fill out these tables. You can provide this information in whatever form you deem necessary or suitable. So with that, that brings us to the end of the wholesaler request. So if there are any questions, please feel free to ask now. Alrighty, with that, I think we can move into the PBM RFI. All right, so once again, this is going to be a little redundant from the first one. We're going to see here is that we have the background explaining our authority for the RFI request. Then moving into the instructions, we're going to explain how you can provide information for the RFI. You can either provide it at the NDC level or at the aggregate level. And if you're providing it at the aggregate level, we just request that you click the box that's scrolled right a little bit below where we're at right now. Don't mind scrolling down 1 or 2 lines. Perfect. And once again, outline that just as for the wholesalers, any respondents for this RFI, you can go ahead and provide requested information through the tables at the appendix in this form. You can utilize and request supplemental Excel file that we have, and we can send over. You can type data directly into any applicable section, or can provide documentation in any form that you deem is suitable. So scrolling down, we'll go into part 1. Part 1 is going to be the contact and drug information. So same deal here. We'll just need the name of the PBM and a point of contact along with the contact's email address, phone number, street address, and so on. And scroll down to the next table, which is the general drug information. Once again, same thing as before. We're just asking for the drug's non-proprietary name, its brand name, and any applicable NDC codes. Then we can move on. We have one more table in the PBM request form that's different from the wholesaler. That's just PBM information. And all we're asking for here is the total number of contracted insurance plans with the PBM and the total number of contracts. So we can scroll down. Here we'll have the data dictionary. So this is just going to outline all of the requested data points. And we're also going to have regulatory citations for where each data point can be found in our regulations. We also coded each data point based on kind of where the data point falls into. So it could be plan data point that's based on plan information, a data point that's based on rebates and revenues, or one that has to do with therapeutic alternatives. You can scroll into part 2. This is where you'll find all the information for that we're requesting related to plan information. And here you can type the figures directly into the form here, or you can use the appendices found at the end of the table or at the end of the document. You can move into part 3 where we have rebates and revenues. Once again, here we're going to list out all the data elements that we're requesting that are related to rebates and revenues. Scroll down to the therapeutic alternatives, and here we'll describe all the data points that we're asking that are related to therapeutic alternatives. Last section we have here is just a section that says, hey, if there's any information that didn't request that you think is necessary for the board to consider, please submit it as supplemental documentation. You can scroll down, see what the appendix tables look like. So we'll have a few here. First one's in Appendix A, is just plan information. All we'll ask for is a drug name or NDC, along with the name of the plan that the PBM has contracted with. And then we'll ask for information about the plan, where the drug is in the formulary, explanations of tiers, etc. We also, I should have noticed in the wholesaler request too, at the bottom of each of these appendix tables, we have a little section where we allow for a narrative to be written to give us any information that's necessary to know regarding the methodology used to calculate the figures and any timeframes for data points that didn't have specific timeframes. Appendix B on the next page will ask for information on rebates and revenues. And then Appendix C on the next page will ask for information on therapeutic alternatives. Now, some of the drugs that we are reviewing obviously have numerous therapeutic alternatives associated with them. So we ask that anyone who's completing this, say, for example, you've requested a Word document and you're populating this RFI through the Word document, we would just request that you make multiple copies of this page and fill them out as appropriate. So with that, that brings us to the end of the PBM RFI, and wanted to give a second for anyone to ask any questions that they might have. All right, there's no questions there. We can go into health insurance carrier RFI. All right, so we'll run through this one real quick. We're going to see a lot of redundancies from previous two RFIs that we went through. We'll have the background giving us our authority for the RFI request, and we can move into the instructions. Once again, all we're saying here is that we're requesting several data points, either at the level of NDC 11s or at the aggregate level. Once again, we have a listing of all the different ways that providers can, or respondents can provide us with the information, whether it be in the appendices in the that are provided in the document, through a supplemental Excel file, typing data directly into this document, or providing supplemental form. So we can scroll down to part 1. Here, we're going to ask for a lot of the same information. We'll have a contact information table, same as we did for the PBM and the wholesaler request forms. Scrolling down, we'll have general drug information, requesting the same information that general drug information that we did before. And the one table that'll be different here compared to the other ones is just insurer information. And really all we're asking for here is the number of plans that the insurer offers. Scroll to the data dictionary. We'll see all the different data points that we're requesting from the health insurance carriers. Have the regulatory citations for each of those data points, and a code saying kind of what category each of these data points fall into, whether it's plan information and costs, or whether it's therapeutic alternatives or supplemental information. Scroll down into part 2. Here we outline all the information that we are asking for related to plan information and costs. You can scroll on to part 3. Here we'll outline all the information that we're requesting related to therapeutic alternatives. And then we can scroll down. Here we just have a note about there's supplemental information that we're, or if there's information that the health insurance carrier believes we're not asking for, but might be necessary for the board to consider. This is where we outline that it can be provided to us as supplemental documentation. Now we can go down into the appendix. We have Appendix A, where we're just asking for plan information for the health insurance carrier. Scroll down. Still in Appendix A, we have a table for cost information, so just giving us the national drug code or the drug name, the plan that the drug is associated with, and information on the cost for that plan and drug. Scrolling down, we'll get to the last page here, which is our therapeutic alternative information. And here's where we'll have, we're requesting information on therapeutic alternatives that the plan has information on. So we request information for each drug within each plan. And same deal here as we had for PBMs. We could have up to 30 therapeutic alternatives listed for a certain drug that's under review. And if the submitter is using the Word document to provide this information, we just request that you make a copy of this table for every therapeutic alternative that you're going to provide information for. So with that, that brings us to the end of the health insurance carrier RFI, and want to give a second for anyone on the line to ask any questions that they might have. All right. And last but not least, we'll go into the manufacturer RFI. So we'll have the background section here, providing the authority for our request. Same deal as before, we're going to have the instruction or request instructions. And same box here, if you want to submit information at the aggregate level, please check the box here. Otherwise, we'd prefer that information submitted at the level of the 11-digit national drug codes. Once again, just one last time, we'll reiterate, respondents can provide information by using the tables and the appendices of this form, by requesting and filling out a supplemental Excel file that can be requested along with this form, typing data directly into each applicable section, or providing documentation in any form that the respondent deems is suitable. Next, we'll get into the part one, contact and drug information. So we have two tables that we request respondents fill out here. First one's the contact information, and really contact information mirrors the same table that we saw in the last three RFIs. And then we'll ask for general drug information. And for the manufacturer request, we're asking for just a little bit more in a general drug information form, and that's just information on any applicable HCPCS codes for the drug of interest and any FDA approved indications. We can scroll down into the data dictionary. So this data dictionary is going to be a little bit more comprehensive than, well, a little bit more extensive than the ones that we saw in the other ones. We have several data points that we're asking for manufacturers. We can see them here. They can be broken down into several categories, whether it's pricing, utilization, revenues, rebates, or marketing and research and development. For each requested data point, we have the regulatory citation. So where in our regulations these data points are coming from. And we also have a few additional pieces of information that we're requesting from manufacturers. And these are going to include life cycle management, estimated value of the cost effectiveness of the drug, information concerning any authorized generics, and information concerning any other ANDAs, BLAs, or NDAs pertaining to the same active ingredient or manufacturer. All of those we would request be submitted as supplemental documentation. And last, as always, we ask if there are factors on here that you feel we should consider that we're not considering, please submit those as supplemental documentation as well. So we can scroll down into part two. We're going to see really the same format as we've seen before. We're going to have a new part and the category of data that we're asking for. So here we'll outline all the pricing data elements that we're asking for. And once again, a lot of these don't have a specific time frame tied to them. So we ask that you provide figures for the most recent calendar or fiscal year, and note timeframes along with any other calculation methods, assumptions, or caveats that could be provided in the narrative format. Scrolling down to part three, these are the data elements that we are requesting that are related to utilization. We can scroll into part 4, rebates. So we have several data elements that we are requesting that are related to rebates. Scroll into part 5, we can see all of the revenue related data points that we are requesting. And then part 6, we have a few data points that we're requesting related to research and development, as well as marketing. And lastly, in the supplemental documentation section, we'll outline the 4 piece of information that we're requesting that can't be populated directly into tables. That's going to include lifecycle management, cost effectiveness, information on authorized generics, and information concerning any other ANDAs, BLAs, or NDAs. All those we would like submitted as supplemental documentation. And we also encourage manufacturers to provide any other supplemental documentation on factors that they believe the board should consider, but are not considering as part of the regulations. Scroll down into the appendix. Appendix A, we'll see pricing information. So we'll have 2 tables here. One table is going to be for Maryland pricing. Second table is going to be related to international pricing. Scroll to the next page for Appendix B. We can see what the tables look like for our utilization requests. So we just have one table here asking for the number of units sold in the state, number of units sold nationally. Can move on to the next page. We'll have 2 tables to fill out for rebate information. First table is going to be related to rebates received and provided in Maryland. And the second table is going to be related to expected rebates. We can scroll to the next page. We'll see we have one table, or actually we have 2 tables here. First table is going to be revenues. Going to ask for several fields here. And then we have a second table on the next page asking for a few more data points related to revenues for the drug product under review. And we have one more page, Appendix E, where we're asking for data points related to research and development and marketing. So with that, that completes a quick rundown of all the RFI forms. So we have the door open for any questions that you guys might have.
Great. CD, you want to go to the next slide? Thank you, Christian. That was great. I guess the last thing I'll note just before we get started, and I meant to say this as part of the submission part, but there's a likelihood that folks will be submitting confidential and proprietary information, and we do have a kind of process and protocol for managing that information. I would just say that if you reach out to us through the RFI website, we will then work with you to submit the information. If you're going to be using our secure file transfer protocol, which everyone is going to be available to everyone, the front end will basically look the same for you. A lot of the protections on confidential and proprietary information are on our side. So we will need you to kind of notify us that we are going to be receiving that data, and then it will kind of set the processes that we will follow to protect that data. But for everyone involved, it should probably be the same general look on the front end, where you reach out to us, we send you the link for the secure file transfer protocol, and everyone has that same entry point to get it over to us. So with that, we'll open it up for any questions and answers that folks have, and look forward to the discussion. Any questions that you are not able to send today, feel free to submit them to the RFI inbox. We'll provide written responses wherever we can. And then also, if it's a question that we think will benefit the group, we'll also try to update in a Q&A document that we'll try to make available to everyone. And then also, if there are kind of specific questions to your submission, we're always happy to kind of work through any technical issues with you on a one-on-one basis as well. We just wanted to address any high-level concerns that the group may have, and answer as many questions for as many people as possible in this forum. So I think we'll give folks probably another 30 seconds to raise their hand. Otherwise, we're happy to give everyone's time back. Okay, great.
Andy, you have a
Yeah, I
question in the
saw. Yeah, Jennifer, I saw that. Yep.
Hi, can you share a little bit more information about the protections you have in place on your end for confidentiality, including the ability of anyone in the state to like FOIA request these documents and things like that?
Yeah, so I will. Okay, so I'll kind of just start. So we have a number of protections that we have in the state or around trying to protect confidential proprietary information. So there's kind of these legal protections. So there's confidentiality agreements that we will have, and they would be protected from FOIA. I can give you that assurance. Though, if there's any changes to that, I would let you know. But it would be protected, and then also just in terms of the protections on the inside, it's basically a series of processes and protections on who has access to these data and how they will use them. So it's going to be basically a need to know basis, an extremely small team of people that would have access to it. And then those systems where this information would be stored would basically be walled off from any other entity. So there's no one else besides the people designated to access that information will have access to it. So there's that legal element. There's a technical element of us trying to ensure that we're using the systems that use the highest technical standards. I think we want to be generally careful about any kind of like specifications there. So I'll have to talk to my team and see what we can share about that, because you don't want to tell folks how you're protecting it, I think. But at a high level, I think we just are trying to use the most secure tools available to store that information. And we've kind of vetted all the different systems that where the information will be stored. I think we can, if you have questions on that, I think we can, provide information on a case-by-case basis, and we will see what we can kind of publish on the website and make available for everyone. And then the biggest thing, I think overall, is the administrative protection. So again, that's just managing who has access to what information, how they're going to be accessing it, in what circumstances, how long would their access last before it disappears, those kinds of things, and also just appropriate training for folks that would have access to those data. So I know that's kind of a very high level, but I can try to see what kind of specifics we can provide.
Andy, I also shared the link to our regulations around that
thank you,
in the chat.
Yeah. But Jennifer, to your question, we'll see what we can publish and what level of specificity, but at a high level, those are the kinds of protections that we have in place. Any other questions? Seeing none, again, we're happy to answer any questions that do come in through email. So rfi.pdab@maryland.gov. Sorry that we have so many different emails floating around. It does help us kind of organize different communication. So if you accidentally send anything to the wrong email, it will get to the right place eventually. This just helps us internally kind of manage different categories of work. So, but we do encourage all RFI communications to go to this inbox. We will talk about internally if this was a useful presentation. So if so, we will try to post this presentation. And then also the Q&A document. So as we do get questions that may be relevant to the entire group, we'll try to publish those as a Q&A. And then to Jennifer's question, we'll try to see what we can share in terms of our confidential, proprietary, and business confidential protections, because I know that is a major question from a lot of entities that will be submitting data. I did mean to include the deadlines. The folks that received the request for information should have received it, I think, last Thursday. And then the 30-day deadline, I think, is August. I want to make sure I get this right. Sorry, let me pull this up. All right, so the deadlines for folks are, it was posted on July 25th, last Thursday. So that means for the first round, or the 30-day deadline is Monday, August 26th. However, any entity may request a 30-day extension. Just make sure you get that extension to us prior to that deadline. So before August 26th, please let us know if you would like that extension. Yeah, we're available. We're happy to work with folks. And I'll go back to where I started, saying that this is everyone's opportunity to give the board information that they should be considering as part of this process. The board will ultimately make their terminations and deliberations based on the data that is available to them. So we're hoping that folks are able to share anything that may be relevant or informative to the board as they make their decisions. And we want this to be as easy and painless as possible. So we are going to do everything we can to be flexible and accommodate any kind of preferences or formats that you guys have. So with that, I see, are there any more chats? Let's see. No, just the question. Okay, great. All right, so with that, please feel free to keep in touch. We look forward to working with everyone on the line, and thanks for your interest. And we'll talk to you soon.